Well, hi and howdy, folks. Welcome once again to Dave Diggs History. I'm the host of this here channel, Dave Diggs, and it's all about history here. Good to see everybody. Have yourselves a seat on these comfortable benches. If you're new here, welcome. Glad to see you. Hope to see you again sometime. And for those of you who have been around for a while, some of this is going to sound a little familiar to you, but don't worry about it. I had been mentioning, maybe even lamenting, the fact that it's, February, and I've been lamenting since January, that there are so very few children here. Of course, this being farm country, children are needed to work on the farm because that takes priority. The farm has to exist. Okay, fine. What's happening in January and February that takes them away from the school? It's wet, it snows, there's rain, mud, cold, lots and lots of cold. What could possibly be keeping them from coming to school? What are they into? Well, let's answer that question. I've asked it several times. Let's answer it. What they're into is this. This is a tobacco leaf. Tobacco's big business in Virginia at this time and before and after this time. This is not in its raw state. This has been cured. In its raw state, just at harvest, they are quite green in color and they seem to have a waxy coating. But that's what's keeping the children away. Tobacco is a very, very labor-intensive product. Lots of hours go into it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What is the tobacco culture of Virginia? And I want to issue a disclaimer of some sort. If you're from another tobacco-producing state, Maryland, Kentucky, North Carolina, Tennessee, even Pennsylvania, what I'm about to tell you might not jive with your locality and how you do things or did things in your own tobacco culture. And if there are some differences, it's probably because you live in one of those states and you don't live here. I'm going to talk to you about how it runs here. But before we get down to what's happening this month in tobacco culture, and last month for that matter, let's do a little bit of history. How did Virginia get here? Well, in 1611, there's a fellow by the name of John Rolfe, otherwise known as the husband of Pocahontas, and he gets hold of some seeds about 1611 or so, and thinks, I wonder if this will grow here. And if so, can I make any money off of it? So he plants some, grows some, harvests some, ships it to England, aboard the Elizabeth that arrives in 1614, and it's an immediate hit. It goes bonkers. Not a period word, I think, but it goes bonkers. Immediate success, there's some money to be made here. And so he plants and plants, and other planters in the area hear of this. They decide, let's make a great big huge pile of money too by planting tobacco. And whereas only about 4,000 pounds of tobacco was harvested and sent to England in 1614, by the time 1774 gets here, this is 1 year before the American Revolution begins, we are sending 55 million pounds of tobacco to England. And some people, not all, are getting fantastically rich on this. Mansions, lavish mansions. There's a good deal of money to be made here, and some people are just raking in the bucks. Now, as we go through this, and I explain this is how it's done here, and again, if it's not done where you are in this manner, don't think I'm trying to blow smoke or anything. No pun intended. Again, this is how we do it here. In about late December, depending weather, soil, the land has to be cleared to make way for planting. You clear it by taking all the trees, if there are any, and cutting them down and removing them. If there's any underbrush, burn it. Then you plant your seeds, and you cover it over with pine boughs to protect it against the frost. About, give or take, a week or 10 days, or however long it takes. Agriculture is dependent largely upon the weather. You can pretty much guess that when it comes time to transplant, these seeds are not going to grow to maturity where they were planted. They're going to have to be transplanted into hills. As a matter of fact, while the seedlings are coming up from the ground, people are going to be at work building hills, about knee-high or so, and the seedlings will be then transplanted once the hills are ready and once it's time for transplanting into the hills. And that's where they will stay in these hills until it's time for harvest. Now, tobacco is an intensely labor-sucking crop. And it's going to take a lot of attention from now until harvest. You're going to have to take care of the vermin, like worms. There's the tobacco hornworm, there's the flea beetle, there's other assorted insects that will attack and devastate the crop. Can't have that. There's weeding. You have to weed because you want all the nutrients of the soil, all the energy of the soil to go into the leaves. That's where the money is, in the leaves. So there's weeding, continual weeding. Now, at some point in the mature process, as the plant is growing, there will be shoots that come out from an area between the leaf and the stalk. Those are suckers, and you engage in removing them in a process known as suckering. You remove them. They draw nutrients away from the major leaves, and you don't want that. Also, there's topping. At the top of the plant, there's going to be a seed pod and some flowers. That doesn't get you anything except seeds for the next year's crop. So those have to be removed in a procedure known as topping. And the bottom leaves on the stalk, they get removed because they draw nutrients away from the finished product eventually. It's all about the finished product. Now, at some point, and this is largely based on the talent of the person doing the growing, because it will vary depending on circumstances, and they will vary too, we're going to engage in harvesting. Now, all the leaves will be removed from the stalk by hand, and then they are tied up into bundles on sticks. And it's a process known as sticking. They get hung up in a tobacco barn, and they're going to cure there, dry there, for a period of time sufficient to get what you want to happen. And in order to get to this state, a dried state, you're going to have to leave them there and let nature do its work with the drying process for 6 to 8 weeks or more. All these figures, these time figures, they're subject to change. At some point, the sticks come down, the leaves get untied from the sticks, and you lay out the leaves on the floor. This is known as sweating. The leaves are going to have to sweat for a while, maybe 8 to 10 days, a little bit more, a little bit less, depending. And then whenever it is determined that they're ready to be taken to market, you take them down, or they're up off the floor, and you tie them in bundles of about 5 to 14 to a bundle. And then they have to go off to be inspected. And depending on what time period we're talking about, they're going to a government warehouse, state government warehouse, where an inspector will look them over and issue a judgment. These are good, these are not so good, these are terrible. And there will be perhaps a buyer there or a representative of a buyer, like a jobber, who will then determine, we'll take these, we won't take those. At that point, they're packed up into barrels known as hogsheads. These hogsheads are about 146 gallon capacity in size, and when they're fully packed with tobacco, they weigh about 1/2 ton each. And then they're sent to market. Sometimes, if there's water transportation available, they go down to a port of embarkation via a bateau, Batteaux. And there'll be a graphic at the end of this presentation showing just what a bateau looks like. And it happens to be the bateau that was at the park, the Living History Park that I used to work at. Now, once this happens, you have a small respite until the next time you have to do this. But that's what the children are up to now. If it's February, they're probably at least getting ready to plant the seeds, and somebody else in the family are preparing the hills. And that's how that works for the most part for around this time period, 1850. But although there's a great deal of money to be made, and speaking of money, now that I have your attention, tobacco, particularly during the colonial time of this period, was used as money. You could pay debts with money. You could be paid in money. You can pay your taxes in money. Tobacco. Money, tobacco. Largely the two terms are interchangeable. And we've discussed money before, how little coin and hard money there is. So tobacco can take its place. Now, although tobacco was a big hit, it wasn't a big hit with everyone. There were some detractors, shall we say. As a matter of fact, there was a man named John Spark, Englishman, and in 1565, circa, he wrote a little something about tobacco. The Floridians, referring to the natives who live down there, the Floridians, when they travel, have a kind of herb dried, which a cane and an earthen cup in the end, with fire and dried herbs put together, do suck through the cane the smoke thereof, which smoke satisfieth their hunger, and therewith they live 4 or 5 days without meat or drink. Well, that's his observation. And as a matter of fact, that is the earliest, 1565, that's the earliest mention we have in English of the native use of tobacco. Now, other people, no. James I, for instance, James I. He apparently did not like tobacco. See if you can interpret just how much he didn't like it. This is James I of England, King James, of course. He wrote a little pamphlet called A Counterblast to Tobacco. And he said that indulging in tobacco was, quote, a custom loathsome to the eye, hateful to the nose, harmful to the brain, dangerous to the lungs, and in the black stinking fume thereof, nearest resembling the horrible Stygian smoke of the pit that is bottomless. Yep, it's pretty strong there. But his son, James I, apparently realized that, okay, so some people like this, some people don't. But in reality, a lot of people like this product called tobacco and are consuming it in vast quantities, and there's money to be made. So here's what he said, and it's specific to Virginia. He said that Virginia was wholly built upon smoke, tobacco being the only means it hath produced. That sounds about right for the period. It was the largest crop in Virginia. But a little side note here, where does tobacco fit in the overall scheme of, for lack of a better word, agriculture? Well, tobacco is related genetically to tomatoes, potatoes, and peppers. And those three plus tobacco are all part of the nightshade family. Enough said about that. But that's largely the way it was depending on what time it is, for the tobacco culture in Virginia at this time, except, did you know there was an except coming, a but coming? There is. If we're talking about Tidewater, Virginia, that area of Virginia closest to the seashore, or the Piedmont of Virginia, that area between the mountains and the Tidewater, everything that I said, well, that's all true. We do this at this time, this at that time. But this here is not the Tidewater. This here is not the Piedmont. This is Southwest Virginia. We do things differently here. Ask anybody from the Piedmont, ask anybody from the Tidewater about people who live in Southwest Virginia, and they'll tell you, oh, those people, man, there's something. And there is. As to what we're doing differently and why, well, how long have I been yammering on here? Just about too long. What we're doing here and why, it's going to have to wait. If you've been following the channel, you know every so often I comment on how long these episodes can be and how I do not like long episodes. I have enough trouble just listening to myself yammer on at length, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, on and on and on. So, we're going to leave it right there so I can have something for next time. And in the meantime, hope to get a like and subscription from you folks who have not yet done so. It helps the channel. And I'm glad to see you, whether you subscribe or not. Happy to have you here, and also in the future. And speaking about the future, as always, I have the honor to remain your most humble and obedient servant, since I'm not indulging in the demon weed, what am I going to do with this? I'll figure it out. This is Dave Diggs, your most humble and obedient servant, coming to you from, as always, a long time ago. Please take care of yourselves, and we will see you sometime in the future.